All right, everyone, welcome to the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center program, Learning in a Virtual Environment Live, highlighting relevant topics in 21st CCLC out-of-school time programming with special guests from the field. Now, let's get started with today's live with a welcome from Dr. Candace Ferguson, Project Director for the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center.
Thank you, and hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this joint webinar hosted by the U.S. Department of Education's 21st Century Community Learning Centers, National Technical Assistance Center, and the National Center for Homeless Education. Today, we're highlighting a shared opportunity, one that brings together the 21st CCLC program and the McKinney-Vento Education for Homeless Children and Youth to better support our students who are most in need. I want to reemphasize today that no matter where you're joining us from which part of the country, these are all our students. And it's really up to us to recognize when they need help and to ensure that they're connected to the services that are available through both of these programs. So whether you work at the local, the state, or the federal level, your role in identifying and supporting these students is so critical. These conversations and collaborations are exactly where this work begins. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters who will introduce our guests, and let's kick off this important conversation. Hillary and Shanika, over to you.
Thanks, Candace. My name is Hillary, and I'm a Senior Technical Assistance Liaison with the U.S. Department of Education's 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center. The NTAC is the professional learning home for the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. We make sure that all SEA coordinators, leaders, professionals obtain the knowledge and skills that they need to implement programs that engage and empower students and their families to build lasting success as lifelong learners. And so to achieve that goal, we provide best practices, evidence-based resources, and professional learning opportunities to build the capacity of 21st CCLC practitioners to support underserved youth and their families. I'm honored to be co-hosting this session with Shanika.
Thank you, Hillary, and welcome everyone for joining us today. For over 25 years, 21st Century Community Learning Center programs have provided a safe environment for learning outside of the typical school day, particularly for students who attend high poverty and low performing schools. In addition to addressing academic needs, these programs are uniquely positioned to support those faced with risk, such as those experiencing homelessness. We are thrilled to present this webinar today with our partners at the National Center for Homeless Education, or NCHE, as we explore how programs can collaborate to support children and youth experiencing homelessness and their families. More specifically, we will dive into understanding the McKinney-Vento Act and the Education for Homeless Children and Youths Program, or EHCY, and how in many ways 21st CCLC programs can support the same demographic.
Before we introduce all of our guests today, we have a message from Dr. LaShondra Scroggins and Brian Thurmond at the U.S. Department of Education. LaShondra?
Thank you, Hillary. On behalf of the U.S. Department of Education, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, hosted by the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center in partnership with the National Center for Homeless Education. As Shanika said, for more than 25 years, 21st CCLC programs have provided safe, supportive, and engaging spaces for students outside of the regular school day, especially those in high poverty and low performing schools. These programs not only provide academic support, but also serve as trusted places where students and families can find connection, encouragement, and resources that make a difference well beyond the classroom. Today's focus is especially important. Across the country, far too many children and youth face the challenges of homelessness. These challenges can disrupt every part of a young person's life, including their ability to learn, to connect with peers, and to feel safe and supported. Yet we know that 21st CCLC programs are uniquely positioned to be part of the solution, working in partnership with schools, community organizations, and families to provide stability and opportunity. My hope is that today inspires new ideas and equips you with strategies to better serve students and families in your communities. Thank you for your commitment to this work. The U.S. Department of Education is proud to stand alongside the McKinney-Vento program as we ensure every student, no matter their circumstance, has the chance to thrive. I'm excited for the conversation ahead. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Brian Thurman, to bring greetings. Brian?
Thank you so much, LaShondra. You stated the purpose of today's call and the promise of today's call so perfectly, so I'll be brief. But my name is Brian Thurman, everyone. Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see so many folks on the line today. I work at the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Elementary and Secondary Education, where I am one of the program officers for our programs for students experiencing homelessness, including the EHCY, or Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. My role on our small but mighty team is to focus on our technical assistance portfolio. So I get to work very closely with our fabulous team at the National Center for Homeless Education, which is funded out of our program office. You're going to learn all the nitty-gritty details about the EHCY program in just a little bit, but just to set the stage a little bit, I wanted to share that really the key underlying purpose of the EHCY program is to ensure that students experiencing homelessness have access to the same free and appropriate public education as do their permanently housed peers. And really one of the key responsibilities of practitioners at both the state and local school district level is to ensure that students experiencing homelessness can access and don't encounter any unintended barriers to full participation in the full array of programs that are offered at schools. And that includes programming that happens outside of traditional school hours, including 21st century programs. So today's conversation is really perfectly underscoring the opportunity we have across programs to ensure that students experiencing homelessness can realize the full benefit of participating in 21st century community learning center programming. I'm really, really excited to learn from the experts that we have on the line today. And I'm really grateful to the team, both at the U.S. Department of Education, LaShondra's team, and the team at the NTAC for allowing some space to elevate the unique needs of students experiencing homelessness today. So with that, I'm going to say thank you and welcome and turn it back over to our facilitators.
Thank you both, LaShondra and Brian, for welcoming us and our audience to today's webinar. Now it's time for us to meet the rest of our representatives and our guests. And so I'm going to pass it over to Carter Clausen.
Thank you, Hillary. My name is Carter. I am co-project director of the National Center for Homeless Education, or NCHE. We are the technical assistance arm for the U.S. Department of Education's EHCY program that Brian referenced. And we offer training and technical assistance to a range of stakeholders that are all working to support children and youth experiencing homelessness as part of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. And that includes state coordinators who oversee homeless education programs at the state level, many of whom I can see are on this webinar today, local liaisons who work directly with schools and with families, community partners, and we also work with parents, students, and other key stakeholders. And I will just mention that NCHE is managed through a collaborative partnership of 3 organizations, that's Soffel Partners, ICF, and Pearl Strategies. You can visit our website, which my colleague Julie will drop into the chat, nche.ed.gov. To learn more about what we offer, the site has training, data, and resources, all related to supporting children and youth experiencing homelessness. It is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists today. They have taken time during the busiest time of the year to share with us all today to benefit our work together. Paul Lagomina is the Highly Mobile Student Programs Manager at the Colorado Department of Education and also serves as the state coordinator for the EHCY program. Paula has over 15 years of experience in serving the state of Colorado, implementing cross-agency projects and initiatives. Her focus on building awareness of the unique challenges faced by the students across Colorado experiencing high mobility and/or housing instability has led to greater identification of eligible students and greater connections at the local level to needed services. Paula leverages her networks across the state to support vulnerable student populations, specifically in the design and delivery of training and technical assistance. Mike Adler is the current out-of-school time director for the Lake County School District. Known as Project Dream, Lake County's out-of-school time programs focus on equitable access to enriching programs. This includes after-school, break camps, and summer programs, and then other supportive services for families. Mike also serves as the McKinney-Vento liaison for Lake County School District. He's a master's in education, human development from Harvard Graduate School in Education. And then finally, we will hear from Julie Radican, who leads technical assistance for NCHE, or the National Center for Homeless Education. Julie has served as a director for HUD housing programs, Continuum of Care lead, and homeless management information systems administrator. She has spent 13 years as a regional McKinney-Vento coordinator in Wayne County, Michigan. And as the NCHE TA lead, Julie designs learning experiences just like this and other engagement opportunities for our state coordinators and other NCHE audiences. We're so happy you all are here with us today.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. And as we get started, to our audience, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please put them in the Q&A box. We will have some time at the end to answer some of your questions. Shanika, let's get started.
Great. Now, first things first, we want to share with you a Collaborative Connections fact sheet about 21st CCLC and McKinney-Vento. Much of what we cover today is outlined in this fact sheet, so we highly encourage you all to check it out. Now, it is important to understand how homelessness is defined under the McKinney-Vento Act, Section 725. And so homeless children and youths are individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This includes those living in emergency or transitional shelters or in shared housing as a result of a financial emergency or natural disaster. It's also important to note that in the 21st CCLC space, we often refer to the young people in our programs as students. In the work of the Education for Homeless Children and Youth, or EHCY, the same group of young people are referred to as children and youth. As we hear from various folks today, these terms may be used interchangeably, but keep in mind we are talking about the same stakeholder group.
As you see in the fact sheet, there are some similarities in the funding between 21st CCLC and EHCY. The McKinney-Vento Act was reauthorized in 2015 under ESSA. These are formula grants from the federal government to the states who administer them through competitive grants to lead education agencies, or LEAs. The purpose of this funding is to identify eligible students experiencing homelessness and ensure that they are able to enroll and regularly attend school. You can already see, I hope, how the work of 21st CCLC and EHCY align. Some of the other ways in which these two programs align include directing funds to where they're needed most, in engaging and supporting families, in addressing overall well-being, and connecting to support from community-based organizations and resources. Every community looks different and has different resources available to them. So we'd love to pause, take a moment, and hear from our audience, all of you, about how you're connecting to essential community-based support in your area. So we have launched a poll, and you can see that on your screen. And we just want to get you to take a second and drop in your answers. So what needs are you seeing in your community? What assets are available with you in your community to support those needs? And how have you connected to community resources in the past to better support your work? Thank you for those of you who are just taking a moment and answering this poll. One of the great things about having conversations and sharing these kind of resources with one another is that it gives us a chance to see what you might not be thinking of in your own community. That really is what's happening in your community, in your space. That's a resource you just hadn't considered yet, that somebody else may need to hear, may need to see. And so we will just give a few more seconds for people to jump in, share their answers. Shanika, there are some fast fingers
I
moving.
see.
I have about 15 more seconds, and then we're going to look at some of these answers.
Share. If we can see them.
Well, I think we'll have to see if we can come back to some of these answers, get them popped up for you.
I'll put them up on the screen for you now.
Oh, perfect. Here we go.
Okay. So in one there.
There are so many things here that you're seeing, experiencing, and using in your community. I mean, some of the obvious of food, housing, transportation are certainly things to come up that are, on people's radar. As far as what are the needs, what are the things that people are looking for. But even things like notification of those programs and ways to access the different resources are a piece of that. And then for those who are doing the work, knowing where there's food, where there's housing, what agencies are supporting this work, even things like how you can access local banks is one that jumps out at me. And I wonder if that's more connected to food banks and food pantries, but really recognizing what the things that there are here that can be a part of the resources that get used. And so I think that's just the places that we want to get started in our conversation today. And so, Shanika, you want to take it from here?
Absolutely. And this is why we are extremely grateful to have our partners at NCHE to join us today to take us a little more in depth behind what is actually available to us in our program. So we're thrilled to have Julie join us today. Julie, let's hear more about your work and the National Center for Homeless Education.
Thank you, Shanika. Good afternoon or morning, everyone. I'm thankful that we were able to partner with 21st CCLC, the National Technical Assistance Center, to provide this opportunity to you today. My name is Julie Radican, and I serve as the Technical Assistance Lead of the National Center for Homeless Education, or NCHE, like you've heard before. I've been in this role for about a year now, and every day I'm reminded of both the challenges these children and youth face and the incredible resilience they demonstrate. As a technical assistance lead, I work directly with state coordinators, local homeless education liaisons, and school districts across the country to help them implement effective programs and remove barriers to the education for children and youth experiencing homelessness. The work we do isn't just about compliance with federal law. although that's certainly important. It's about recognizing that stable education can be the one constant in these children's lives when everything else feels uncertain. It's about understanding that children's zip code or housing situation should never determine their access to quality education. The National Center for Homeless Education serves as the Federal Technical Assistance Center for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth program, which we call EHCY. Our mission is to ensure that all children and youth experiencing homelessness have equal access to the same free, appropriate public education available to other children and youth, and we accomplish this through several key functions. First, we provide technical assistance and training to state coordinators and local homeless education liaisons nationwide. This includes webinars, conference sessions, and live TA through the NCHE helpline. Second, we serve as a clearinghouse for information and resources. We develop guidance documents, toolkits, and other materials that help our audience understand students' rights and available supports, which you can find on our website. Third, we collect and analyze data on students experiencing homelessness to help inform policy and practice. The numbers tell a story. So during the 22-23 school year, more than 1.3 million students experienced homelessness at some point, representing students in every area of the United States. You'll see on your screen a bit of our data from the 22-23 school year. You will see of that about 1.3 million students, that 123, almost 124,000 students were those unaccompanied, so not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. And then you'll see, based off of our little pie graph there on the side, how the nighttime residence of those students breaks down for that school year. Finally, NCHE collaborates with other federal agencies like NTAC to promote awareness of homeless in education. The Education for Homeless Children and Youth program exists because of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which was first passed in 1987 and has been reauthorized multiple times since. The most recent reauthorization was through the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. This federal legislation recognized something crucial, that children experiencing homelessness face unique barriers to school enrollment, attendance, and success. Before McKinney-Vento, these students often fell through the cracks, unable to enroll in school due to the lack of records, missing immunizations or residency requirements, or forced to change schools repeatedly as their housing situations changed. The McKinney-Vento Act establishes several fundamental rights for students experiencing homelessness. So let me highlight a few of those key provisions. Students have the right to remain in their school of origin, which is the school they attend when they become homeless or where they're last enrolled, even if they move outside that school's attendance area. Alternately, they can choose to enroll in the school that serves the area where they're currently staying, which we call the school of residence. Transportation may be provided to the school of origin if requested to remove that educational barrier. Schools must enroll students immediately, even if they lack the typically required documents like transcripts, immunization records, or proof of residency. Schools can request these documents, but they cannot delay enrollment while waiting for them. Students must have access to all programs and services available to other students, including transportation, educational programs for which they meet eligibility criteria, programs for students with disabilities, and gifted and talented programs, to name a few. The McKinney-Vento Act also requires every school district to designate a local homeless education liaison. The liaison is someone who serves as a primary contact for families and ensures that these students receive the services they're entitled to. At the state level, each state must have a state coordinator who oversees implementation and provides support to local districts. What makes this legislation particularly powerful is that it takes a very broad definition of homelessness that goes beyond what people may traditionally think of. The McKinney-Vento Act definition of homeless is any student who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This includes students who are sharing housing with others due to economic hardship, which we often call doubled up. And this subpopulation represents the majority of the students experiencing homelessness that we see. The Education for Homeless Children and Youth program works through multiple levels to create a comprehensive support system for students experiencing homelessness. At the federal level, Funding flows to state education agencies or SEAs, which then distribute those grants to local education agencies, or many call LEAs, based on factors like the number of students experiencing homelessness and the strengths of their applications. But the most direct services happen at the local level, where these funds translate into direct services and supports. Local programs use education for homeless children and youth funding in incredibly creative, impactful ways. For example, removing barriers to enrollment and attendance. This might include helping families obtain required documents, providing uniforms or school supplies, covering fees for extracurricular activities, or ensuring students have the necessary technology for learning. Providing educational support services. Many programs provide tutoring, mentoring, or additional academic support to help students who may have experienced educational disruptions get back on track. Some districts create or partner with specialized programs like 21st CCLC or learning environments designated to meet the unique needs of these students. Because homelessness affects every aspect of a child's life, effective programs often coordinate with community partners to address basic needs through wraparound services. This might include connecting families with housing resources, food assistance, healthcare, or mental health services. Education for homeless children and youth funds are also used to train school staff and community partners on how to identify students who may be experiencing homelessness, understand rights under McKinney-Vento, and implement trauma-informed practices. What I find particularly powerful about this program is how it recognizes that educational stability can be a protective factor for children and youth experiencing homelessness. When everything else in their world feels uncertain, schools can provide that structure, safety, relationships, and hope for the future. The program also emphasizes the importance of maintaining educational continuity. Research consistently shows that school mobility negatively impacts academic achievement. So allowing students to remain in their school of origin, even if that requires providing transportation across district boundaries, can make an enormous difference in their long-term outcomes. This brings me to an area where I see tremendous potential for impact and why we are here today. Collaboration between the Education for Homeless Children and Youth programs and 21st Century Community Learning Centers. These two federal programs are natural partners, and I'm excited about the opportunities for cross-functional collaboration that you will hear about today and learn ways to implement partnerships within your communities. Both programs serve students who face significant challenges, and there's often substantial overlap in the populations we are trying to reach. Children and youth experiencing homelessness frequently need the extended learning time, academic support, and enrichment opportunities that 21st CCLC programs provide. Meanwhile, 21st CCLC programs often serve students living in poverty, many of whom may be experiencing housing instability. The collaboration between potential is rich. 21st Century CCLC programs can provide stable, supportive environments for students experiencing homelessness during out-of-school hours. They can offer homework help, tutoring, and academic enrichment that helps these students stay on track academically despite the disruptions in their lives. From a practical standpoint, 21st CCLC programs can serve as an identification point for students who may be experiencing homelessness. Staff in these programs often develop close relationships with students and families and may be among the first to notice signs of housing instability. There are also important opportunities for joint professional development, shared resources, and coordinated services delivery. Imagine a model where state coordinators and local homeless education liaisons and 21st CCLC coordinators work together to ensure seamless support for students, where transportation provided from school of origin attendance also enables participation in after-school programming, and where both programs can contribute to comprehensive case management for families. We'll luckily hear from some programs like that here shortly. The key is communication and intentional planning. Too often these programs operate in silos when they could be leveraging each other's strengths to create more comprehensive support systems for students. Today, we'll explore what thoughtful cross-program collaboration can look like to help ensure that experiencing homelessness doesn't become a barrier to educational success. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to you, to Shanika and Hillary, and let us know what other questions we can ask as we go through, but excited to hear everyone else's presentations and about their programs today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. So not only were you able to tell us a little bit more about NCHE, EHCY, the McKinney-Vento Act, right? You also touched on different areas around how EHCY positively can a program can positively work to support children and youth experiencing homelessness. Now, you also talked about the potential for programs like 21st Century to collaborate with others to continue to support children and youth. And so we do have a couple of questions that came into the chat. Transportation was mentioned quite a bit, right? That's at the top of everyone's list. And I do know that some of the responses that we are able to share today may not be specific to your state, but this is a great place to start that conversation. So let's go over to the Q&A really quick to see which questions we can address now, because I do know that there are definitely more opportunities to hear more about that cross-functional collaboration opportunity, because that looks like it's at the top of the mind for everyone here. Now, this came up a bit, and you did mention this in your answer, Julie. Someone shared in the Q&A about a possibility of you providing an explanation of any updated transportation expectations for students moving outside of the school of origin's district, right? So where is the responsibility to set up and fund transportation should the student choose to stay or leave the school of origin?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. So school of origin transportation for those children and youth experiencing homelessness is to remove that educational barrier for those students. So students are entitled the right to those transportation services until the end of the school year in which they become permanently housed to get them back to that school of origin during that time that family or student is experiencing homelessness. So this district liaison will really work with that family to ensure that they are staying on top of where the family's staying, what that looks like, and ensuring that that transportation is set up in the way that it needs to for those students that are experiencing homelessness. If there's a more nuanced question that someone might have, feel free to send that question over to the helpline so we can help walk through your very specific question. But in general, students experiencing homelessness get transportation back to that school district of origin while they're experiencing homelessness until the end of the school year in which they become permanently housed.
Okay, does that also include after-school programs? Or does it matter if the program is off-site? That was another question about transportation.
So if the program is off-site, so we work with our after-school programs and our extracurricular activities to help provide that transportation, depending on what it looks like and where it falls within the day for the student. So looking really at the liaison really looks at ways in which the district and or the families within those programs can help those students. But transportation under McKinney-Vento is there to help students get to school and from school. It doesn't give necessarily a definition on what time of day that necessarily has to happen, but we work very closely with our extracurricular partners to ensure that our students experiencing homelessness are fully able to participate.
Thank you. And I see more questions are coming in. What I'm going to do is we're going to hold on to these questions because I can definitely see this being answered in our next section, right? So again, thank you so much, Julie, for sharing with us the work of EHCY and the potential for 21st CCLC programs to support the same needs. Let's continue this conversation about, again, that cross-functional collaboration between our partners. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Hillary.
Absolutely. So these cross-functional collaboration opportunities between 21st CCLC and EHCY is really something special, right? Together, these programs can help fill gaps for children and youth experiencing homelessness. And so there are three potential areas that we want to highlight where this potential is really strong for working together. Programs can connect students to experiencing homelessness and their families to out-of-school time programs through coordinated referral systems. This way, students and families supported through EHCY can gain information and access to the services and supports of a 21st CCLC OST program. So if you're somebody who's coordinating that program, the services in your district, we'd encourage you to find out who runs the 21st CCLC program. Make those connections, right? Programs can also provide academic assistance by offering targeted tutoring or academic support to help students experiencing homelessness catch up, especially if they've missed a lot of school, or get additional support to stay on track academically. There's also non-academic needs that are supported through these programs. 21st CCLC programs offer safe, supportive environments where students experiencing homelessness can access additional support and build these social connections outside of the typical school day.
Yes. Now, if you are wondering about specific activities that could be promoted in OST through a partnership of this kind, there are many things detailed in that fact sheet that we shared earlier, but let's go ahead and call out just a few possibilities. So for one, 21st CCLC programs can offer peer-to-peer support. Programs can develop and disseminate resources and referrals to families in need. Transportation to and from school and OSC programs can get arranged. And we can leverage those community connections by collaborating with local businesses to provide resources and opportunities. Now, what we would love to do now is to hear from our audience again about how you are leveraging the resources in your community. Feel free to tell us in the chat who your partners are in your work. You can drop us a link to your partners if you have that handy as well. And yes, continue to add any questions that you may have in the Q&A. We're going to make sure we get to those answers to your questions throughout today's segment. All right, Leanne, share. Oh, there's a couple of things in there.
So to our audience, we want to hear who are your partners in your work. You don't have to name the specific partner in your specific town or community, but who's somebody innovative that you're working with as you do this, whether it's running 21st Century program, whether it's supporting students who are experiencing homelessness, thinking about who are the innovative partners that you've been able to engage with in this process. Let us know in the chat. Well, Shanika, I think while our audience is thinking about who their partners are, who are those people that they can collaborate with in their work, we have a really phenomenal guest today who can talk to us about what it looks like to implement this stuff that we're talking about a little theoretically in practice. And so maybe that'll help give some ideas to our audience around this. And so at this moment, we are delighted to welcome Paula, who is the McKinney-Vento SEA coordinator in Colorado. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and be having this conversation today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So tell us a little bit about your work.
Great. So really to understand how Education of Homeless Children and Youth program collaborates with our 21st Century Community Learning Program is really to understand why. And I think Julie and Hillary, you did a great job talking, and the fact sheet does a great job talking about why we think these programs working together really makes a difference. And we also look at data. We know in Colorado that homeless and foster students have our lowest four-year graduation rate. 61% of students experiencing housing insecurity graduate in 4 years compared to 84.2%. And then what is interesting about that is it's not just about poverty, because our economically disadvantaged students have a four-year graduation rate of 76.4. So there's something in that mobility that changes student outcomes for our students. We also have the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. I know people are talking a lot about chronic absenteeism across the country, and particularly in Colorado, it is a big focus. 56% of students experiencing homelessness are missing 10% or more of school days in the year. And that is a really big gap compared to our housed students. So it's because of some of these gaps that the Office of Student Supports was created. So I am the Highly Mobile Students Manager. I am the State Coordinator for Education of Homeless Children and Youth. I work with Jamie Burciaga, who is our fearless leader in foster care education. And then the other half of the Office of Student Supports is out-of-school time programs. So we have state and federal funds that work to support out-of-school time programs in Colorado. And we really are working together to build these collaborations across schools and community partners that provide students with multiple vulnerabilities, whether it's poverty or housing insecurity or high mobility due to foster care placements, where whole child supports and resources can be provided to make sure we have more educational access, stability, and success and growth for our students. And because we're on the same team, we're working towards the same goals. So our big goals as a Department of Education this year include accelerating student outcomes, which is often measured by graduation rates, and also increasing student engagement, which is often measured through attendance. So knowing our data, the structure of our team really helps to facilitate successful collaboration across the state in bringing these two grant programs together.
Thanks, Paula, for kind of giving us that picture of what's happening in Colorado, the impact that you're having on our youth who need it most. So tell us a little bit about how these two programs are working together in your state. What does that look like?
So it really starts with our competitive grant processes. So in our request for applications that we send out across Colorado, our 21st Century Grant started awarding priority points for programming that was going to intentionally engage with highly mobile student populations, which under some of the state laws that we have in Colorado is defined as those experiencing homelessness, those who are engaged in the foster care system, and those who are identified through Title I-C migrant education programs. And so with that RFA in place, we're already setting the stage like for people to meet each other. As Shanika had shared before, like who is your 21st century out of school time manager? Who is your McKinney-Vento liaison? And just even in writing that grant, it's forcing them to start talking to each other. I think another big component is the design of 21st century community learning centers in that it allows funding to community-based organizations. Many of these community-based organizations are already providing services to the families who are experiencing homelessness. So this helps to close that circle in terms of wraparound services. It also sometimes provides more flexibility in how services can get to families. So I think a great example of that was during the COVID-19 pandemic when the U.S. Department of Ed issued a waiver where you could provide out-of-school time services during school hours in that remote setting, but asynchronously. And that really allowed students who are maybe missing out on all of the supports that schools offer while we were in that remote space. So they had access to food, they had access to any basic need items that they might have. They had access to their support networks. And that really made a difference. And I think Mike, who's going to talk after me, is a great example of how successful that was. Cross-training. we do a lot of cross training. So we do that at the regional level, we do it at the local level, we do it with our grantees, both sides, 21st Century and Education of Homeless Children and Youth, and really have adopted this kind of mantra of building awareness is building capacity. And that can be really important for our McKinney-Vento liaisons at districts who are often viewed as teams of one, or, you know, having to outsource a bunch of different partners for different aspects of their work. And having a 21st Century Community Learning Center partner to be thinking about how we're wrapping around students holistically can really make a difference.
Thanks, Paula. I really like that. Building awareness is building capacity. I think that really well expresses the things we've just generally talked about so far today, right? It makes both of these programs stronger when they get the opportunity to collaborate together. And so, you know, what does that process look like? Beyond the grant writing stage, what do programs who are doing this successfully do?
Well, I don't want to steal too much of Mike's thunder because he really has just an exemplary program. But I will share some of the stuff that we do at the state level to help facilitate what Mike does at the local level. Like I mentioned, doing the awareness building, and we do that training each other's subgrantees. That's kind of a captive audience that we can give information to and help to model some successful pieces. But we also look for high leverage opportunities. I don't know that in other states, our state leaders see themselves as conveners, but we've really taken on that mindset that it's part of our responsibility at the state level to bring people together, to have space, structure, and facilitated conversations to understand how their work connects. So from the state level, we've been doing regional collaborative conversations, and myself and my co-partner or partner, Cody Buchanan, who's the interim state coordinator or state manager for 21st Century Community Learning Centers in Colorado, would travel around the state and help and provide that space for communities to really understand how they connect. Do they share challenges? Who has strengths in which areas that can meet gaps in other areas? And so that has been really our model in terms of these two programs working together and really understanding why they should work together. And then we look at data a lot. And I think it's really important that, you know, when we're talking about school engagement, when we're talking about accelerating student outcomes, we have similar performance measures for our grantees. So we want to be able to hold up some evidence that, you know, certain strategies could be considered promising practices for school districts across the state. And I think this collaboration is an example of one of those promising practices.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think, Paula, you just gave a challenge to some of your fellow state education agency representatives. But we've got quite a few questions in the chat around, okay, how do we get started? And some of the subgrantees, some of the programs don't have this resource that you and your team are creating. And so how would you recommend that they kind of do that themselves in those places and spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think the absolute first step, if you're going to do something today or tomorrow, would be to share contact lists. So get an understanding. If you're here representing 21st Century Community Learning Centers and you're a site director, who are the McKinney-Vento liaisons in the districts that you're serving in your program, and vice versa. Part of the requirements that state coordinators have with EHCY is to make public the list of McKinney-Vento liaisons that are listed across the state. So there has to be a McKinney-Vento liaison in every school district. And what I love about that first step is it may require then some further awareness building in that, someone gets a phone call and said, I was just on a webinar with 21st Century and with EHCY. You're listed as the liaison. Let's talk about how we can support one another, which then may lead to a question to me. Paula, how do I partner with 21st Century Community Learning Centers? I just got a call from a community-based organization. We also facilitate peer-to-peer conversations at the state level, monthly peer-to-peer conversations for any professional staff at the district or local level who works with a highly mobile population. So we're creating these spaces for them to be talking to each other and talking about challenges and learning things together. And so I think that really creating that space will make a difference in terms of how you're then able to serve students at the local level.
Yeah, absolutely. So figure out who that person is and reach out and then, go from there, have those conversations. So what challenges have you encountered in the landscape, and how are you adapting as a result of this?
Yeah, the unknown, I would say, is probably the biggest challenge that we're all facing right now with federal and state education funding. And so we continue to communicate, and we continue to provide opportunities for local communities to communicate with one another. I can't emphasize the power of convening folks who then live in the same community, and they're using the same language about talking with some of the challenges our students face and some of the resources that are available. So we really are we're just continuing to do the work. Continuing to create those spaces for our local folks to get together and really talk through. We are continuing our regional collaborative conversations. We're going to have 2 more this spring of 2026. And in those, really focusing on different definitions, common language, who to connect with, and then really diving into how do we strategically leverage our partners. And that really comes out of some of the uncertainty that we felt late this summer, in that if some of our funding does go away, how do we build enough awareness that the work can still continue in local communities? And that is so important to me and to our team and to the Department of Education, that regardless of what ends up coming down for funding, we're continuing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that common understanding of what is available and those resources is a strong way to support some of that. Well, thank you, Paula, for sharing with us how you've coordinated these services. And I'm going to pass it back to Shanika to speak a little with our next guest.
Absolutely. And of course, thank you everyone for sharing your questions in the Q&A. They're being answered one by one. I also want to note here that some of these questions could also be addressed in the non-regulatory guidance. So definitely take another look at that, because there is language in there that allows subgrantees to coordinate with these types of programs, especially the EHCY program. So let's continue talking about this, right? We've heard a lot about how to go about working in partnerships between 21st CCLC and EHCY, but what about the true impact of the work? We're going to continue the conversation by hearing from Mike, who will share how this program coordination can positively impact the children and families in our programs. So Mike, can you tell us about your programs?
Yeah, thanks, Shanika. Yeah, I just want to start off by saying that we're a tiny district, and there's evidence by me holding both the McKinney-Vento liaison role and the out-of-school time director role, that this collaboration produces great outcomes. So I'm hoping that while our context might be different from some other folks, that the lessons learned can be extrapolated. Yeah, and everybody can lean into this collaboration. So our out of school time programs, we call them Project Dream, and we're a 21st century community learning center. We've held those grants since about 2010. We're currently participating in both cohort 9 and 10 in the Colorado grants. We operate our after school sites as 21st century centers at each of our 3 schools. We offer about 135 days of after school throughout the calendar year. Our school district also does not attend full day schools on Friday. We have Fridays off, so we do full day Friday programs, and that's sort of blended from 21st century funds and other funds to support that work. Our average daily attendance between our 3 sites is around 170 students. We have last year we had 205 regular attendees, so those are students who attended more than 75 hours of programming through our 21 CCLC programs. And we've also been able to, sort of like I mentioned before, blend our funding sources and program offerings with other grants from the state, from regional and local foundations, and especially some COVID relief funds that helped us launch El Camioncito, which you can see right behind me, which is our converted bus into a mobile learning center that really runs outreach programs. So that's a little bit about our OST programs. Sort of describing our McKinney-Vento programs, we really focus on supportive services for our students, as some of the educational rights that we need to uphold through the McKinney-Vento program are pretty easily achieved in our small rural district. So thinking about how we can really provide equal educational opportunities is the bulk of our program. So we've held the Education of Homeless Children and Youth grant for the past 2 3-year cycles. That's also helped us build some capacity for that program. And like I said, we really are trying to create that equitable and equal opportunity to education. We do that through our access to our out of school time programs, which also includes a weekend meal assistance program, academic support, and credit recovery in our high school program. Also leveraging other opportunities within the school district, such as athletics and transportation. And then a really large part of our McKinney-Vento program is offering supportive services through a community partner. There's a social services organization run by the county, and they do a lot of direct assistance for food, shelter, and basic needs, and they do a lot of referrals for healthcare, housing, employment, and supportive services. So some of those enrollment, transportation to school of origin or school of residence issues aren't quite as prevalent in our context, so we're really focusing on those supportive services.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And you were actually able to kind of share a couple of strategies and ways that you are supporting youth, especially in the rural areas. And it looks like that's something that is at the top of mind for a couple of attendees here today. Can you, and I know you shared that you've had the grant for, you said this is your 2nd or 3rd year with it, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what this collaboration looked like, or what is something that what would be some advice for folks starting this collaboration? What should be kept in mind in the beginning as the collaboration move or progresses over time?
Yeah, so starting with holding those grants, I'd really view those grant seeking opportunities as not just ways to continue services that your district currently holds, but as opportunities to learn from our cohorts, of other program providers at the local level, from the state support. How can you expand those services to really meet the needs of your local community? So I think we would not be able to have the collaboration and depth an array of programs we had if we weren't longstanding grantees, and if those grants didn't provide us the opportunity to expand. So that would be one piece of advice, is to look at those grants as opportunities to learn and grow and flex into new spaces. I think the other huge piece of advice, which actually Paula talked about and a lot of folks have talked about, is just start that collaboration. You know, and again, in my context, I am both. I am the McKinney-Vento liaison and the out-of-school time director. We're a school district of 950 kids, 3 schools, so that kind of makes sense. But that was also intentional. We could have housed that McKinney-Vento liaison role into some other administrative role, or someone who doesn't have the same depth of connection to supportive services in our community. So I think there was intentionality. I didn't make this call myself. When I hired onto this role, I was hiring on to both of these. So I think there's some real strategy behind that. So if you're able to do that, of putting, someone on your OST team in a position of direct service for McKinney-Vento or vice versa, that's really great. And if not, like Paula said, got to make those connections quick and really get to know those people, and connecting folks who actually understand the situations that students are going through. I would say those are the people that really need to connect. Program administrators need to be aware of what's going on, but a lot of this work comes from really making good on the information that students and families trust us with.
Now, Mike, and you also touched on this a little bit. I wonder if you can give us a little bit more examples, right? So, how has your program addressed those very unique needs of the children and youth, especially if they trust you with sharing what they're experiencing? But how were you able to address those needs, especially of the children and youth who are experiencing homelessness, in collaboration with the other projects in the 21st century?
Yeah, so one example is kind of this working from the OST towards the McKinney-Vento direction. So we really promote a lot of our programs. First, we're a commuting town. We're the highest town in the country. We're close to a lot of ski resorts, but they're all 45 minutes over a mountain pass. So a lot of our families need extended learning opportunities and care for their kids. And so it's pretty ubiquitous for folks that are seeking more economic opportunity to have enrolled in our programs. So a lot of families find one of those first steps towards supportive services is just signing up for after school. So once they take that step and our staff get to know that person, a lot of other information comes up pretty quickly when we're coordinating transportation, determining how many days a student needs of after school. We get to learn a student's situation really easily. And because we train our staff to be aware of the definition of homelessness and the services that can afford, then sometimes we start in the OST space and the light bulb goes off and we say, oh, we've got more that we can do for you. Let's ask the right questions, determine eligibility, and then connect to resources. So I think just the process of working with students and understanding what's driving them to be enrolled in our after-school programs helps us understand their home life and context. And then that sort of works in the reverse. We have students who reach out to Wraparound of Lake County, who's our program provider that provides case management services, and they hear about they're looking for food and shelter assistance. And they might not be thinking about the other resources that are available in Lake County. So when that case manager has a conversation with the family, they're thinking, are they enrolled in Project Dream? Have they been getting the weekend meal delivery? What other supportive services? So sometimes it originates in a family advocating for themselves and seeking those basic needs supports, and then they get referred over to out of school time. So I think that's hopefully that kind of exemplifies where that connection, how that connection plays out. And I think some other people might be wondering, well, how does that work in practice? Like, how do you get the McKinney-Vento liaison to talk to the out-of-school time program? And I think that's totally dependent on your local context. Again, it's the same inbox for me. So it's quite straightforward, but I hope that other people, by making those connections, realize that referral process doesn't have to be big and scary. It can just be a conversation with the person doing the other side of the work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Mike. And honestly, that kind of addressed my next question was around recommendations for those in 21st century looking to collaborate. Do you have any lessons learned that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll say just adding to lesson learned and recommendations, training goes a long way. So getting out, I go to staff meetings. I've trained our front office staff. I train our out of school time staff. That cross training between what is our out of school time programming and what are the rights for students experiencing homelessness, I think that's a really important effort and an important next step. I'm one person, and even though we're a school district of 950, I can't understand the situations of every student. So I need a team out there who understands that connection. And then following up on that, once someone shares and makes that referral results in action, that we're more likely to have more referrals. So I think we've really paid attention to producing quality outcomes through those referral processes.
That's amazing. Just wow, right across the board. Thank you for doing this incredible work. So what we're going to do is take a look at a couple of things that were also shared in the chat. I feel like you answered a lot of questions that some people already have, or reconfirm like practices that they are already implementing. What we'll do is transition over to some more Q&A. There are a few more questions that we were able to address in the Q&A, but let's pick up where we left off. And again, folks, if you have any other questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A. I do see some included in the chat, but just one thing to note here, right, as we're thinking about collaborating with partners, when it comes to 21st century, just keep in mind that you cannot blend funds, but you can coordinate and braid these funds with other sources. So it's pretty much like what you touched on quite a bit, Mike, but definitely keep that in mind. And what I'll do is, again, turn it over to Hillary so that we can continue to answer more of your questions. Thank you so much again, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, the sharing in the chat has been phenomenal. I certainly haven't been able to keep up with all of it, but weekend food bags and partnerships in the community with optometrists and mobile dentists, chambers of commerce, churches, nonprofit organizations, recognizing just the benefits of snacks and meals of OST that are likely provided by other federal resources like the National School Lunch Program or Child and Adult Care Food Program. All of those have the opportunity to support this work, and yet we have to be cautious, and I'm paying attention to this question in the chat, that we know where every dollar goes and where it came from, and that it's going to things that are allowable for spending. And so I had dropped the link to the non-regulatory guidance from the 21st CCLC National Technical Assistance Center in the chat, and I am going to drop it in there one more time. I'd encourage you to take a look at that just to see a little bit around what that looks like, what the guidance is. And I'd encourage you to work very closely with your state leaders if you're looking at both of these funds together to make sure that you're spending those funds in appropriate places and in appropriate ways. And then thank you, Leanne, is also going to pull out the same guidance for EHCY and thinking about those pieces together, making sure that it stays on track. You know, one of the things that Paula mentioned in the chat that went by very quickly, if you were looking like I was this idea that that Lake County School District is among the highest in four-year graduation rates for homeless students. They graduate 90% of their homeless students. And if you're somebody who's thinking about engagement in school, think about this work and how it connects together and how it makes sure students show up, students stay engaged in their learning. That's one of the priorities and program outcome measures that are part of that work. And so, you know, really focusing on this work and the way they connect is an important part of it. So some of the questions. So Julie, a couple of questions for you. Are there any changes to the identification of McKinney-Vento students or expansions of protections that our audience needs to be aware of?
No, there haven't been any changes recently to any of that. It's still looking at that definition. Every student gets looked at a case-by-case basis, and ensuring that the liaison is the one who is determining that eligibility for them. And then the liaison really works closely with those students and those families to ensure that they are being connected to all those resources that are available to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Mike, I'm going to throw this one your way, and it kind of goes a very different direction. Just tell us a little bit more about how the Mobile Learning Center works.
Yeah, so the resource of the bus itself, that was supported through a grant from the governor's office here in Colorado. It was really to respond to gaps in access to education during the height of the pandemic. So that we had a different funding source that really brought this resource online. And then from there, you know, in the height of the pandemic, this was getting people access to internet, to food that they were missing by not attending school every day. We kind of had like an A/B schedule there for a little bit. But since we sort of graduated out of that era, this became a really great resource for us to sort of inherit into our 21st century program. So we were able to offer our site-based after-school programs, and then we were able to offer mobile after-school programs. So we had, you know, a trained and paid 21 CCLC staff member go out on this bus to our local communities. There's a couple of neighborhoods that kind of outside of town and do enrichment on the bus and activities.
Yeah. You know, we are still having some chat about that braiding versus blending of funds, and that may be a really good example of it, of here's who paid for the bus, but here's the funding source that's paying for the staff to support the work that's doing it, and tracking each of these pieces separately while coordinating the services that support them. And so if you're still thinking about that, maybe that will add a practical example to the context that we're talking about. So for this group, any ideas around how to support McKinney-Vento with transportation and support transportation and McKinney-Vento together? You know, we've talked about it a lot, but it just keeps coming up in conversation. What does that look like? Who's doing it successfully? What creative solutions have you seen? And, you know, Paula, Mike, Julie, we'd love to have any of you chime in who have ideas to share.
So I know that Leanne and Carter have both shared in the chat our transportation brief a couple of times. So that's a good place to kind of go and look for what some transportation strategies may look like on how some of that could work. Our education liaisons are great at working with the transportation departments and directors within their schools, of helping connect those students to that transportation that's available to them. But I would love to hear kind of Paula, Mike, if either of you from your local perspective have some on the ground practical things that have worked for your state or your program.
Well, I kind of want Mike to talk about one piece, but the bus behind him, I think, is a great example of bringing programming out into the community. So for those who are having a hard time accessing out-of-school time programming, Lake County was super creative in coming up with a way to go to the community, which was just so cool and such a great example. I would say from a state level, and I think a lot of my state coordinator friends would agree with me, but transportation comes up in every single meeting in terms of a challenge for students being able to access school day and out of school time and extracurriculars. So one thing Colorado is doing this year is starting to do joint trainings with our transportation department, where the transportation director comes and the liaison comes, and we'll do that in a regional approach as well. Again, once people understand what being McKinney-Vento is and the rights that are afforded to these students, I've yet to meet someone who's like, well, I'm just going to throw that perspective out, right? This is something that once you understand this population, you really do start changing practices.
Yeah, and just to add to what Paula left off on, once we've understood the living situation and the needs and the rights of a student, we have limited transportation offerings in our after school and out of school time programs. Those students, they just get preference. When we have to make those hard decisions about who we're going to support with those resources, our staff, not just me, but all the staff, they understand the importance of getting those kids to a safe, enriching environment. And so I think it's become kind of second nature for us to ensure that those kids are getting access to those resources, despite the differences we might see in student advocacy or in caregiver advocacy, because that's sometimes the thing that prompts one of our staff members to extend a resource is someone else reaching out. But I think our staff, like Paula was saying, it's hard to put that perspective down once you hold it. And our staff just do a great job of identifying who really has the need.
Absolutely. The message really is that I'm hearing from you. One, visit the resources around transportation, but it's all about creating this web of layered pieces and building them together. Whether it's some of the resources we've talked about today in the chat, resources like Perkins funding, right, have been mentioned, career and technical education resources, and really building all of these things together to best support our students are the things that we need to be thinking about and collaborating together with, reaching out to neighborhood districts, right? Reaching out to people near you who can take part in this work and determine how can best this support and outreach to the young people. Julie, one of the questions that we have here is really around what supports are in place to educate and inform school districts and the 21st Century Program staff about homelessness and other risk factors impacting children and youth. Can you point us to a couple of places that you would encourage somebody to start who sat on this webinar and is like, my team, my school, my community, the people I work with don't know about this and they need to? What would you recommend that they do?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, like I believe Paula said earlier, every district has a homeless liaison. So finding that homeless liaison within your district. If you're not able to locate the homeless liaison for your district, to find your state coordinator. NCHE does have a list of all state coordinators on its webpage, so you're able to go there to find that state coordinator. That state coordinator then can connect you to that liaison. So really first step is finding that liaison within your district. That liaison will help to do some professional development around your district, but also kind of looking at a broader landscape of what homelessness looks like is connecting with your local continuum of cares and other homeless service providers in your area to really be able to just learn from what they see as what homelessness looks like within your communities is another great spot to go through.
Absolutely. Thanks for adding kind of some of that context and place and space. And so if you're the person who I saw who says we haven't been able to hire someone in our district, start looking at that state person, some of these other resources that Julie and her team have either shared in the chat or mentioned, but bring that information to the surface because these are the things that our young people need. One of the questions in the chat is specifically around 21st CCLC funds. No, those funds are not just for students who are McKinney-Vento youth and children. And so those funds really target a larger group of young people who can benefit from the supports academically, personal well-being, family support that the 21st Century programs offer. And are available in many, but not all districts like the McKinney-Vento resources are. And so just looking for those, oftentimes those programs can be seen on your State Department of Education website, and you can identify where those resources are in your state and in your community for your young people. We have just a few more questions before we kind of wrap up our time for today. Really just two more. This one is from a virtual school. And so they just want to know, what would it look like to provide McKinney-Vento in this setting? What information is available around this?
Virtual is always a bit of a nuanced question. So if you've got a specific, great question for the helpline, but in a broad kind of answer for virtual is it's depending on what your virtual school is. Are you a virtual public school? Are you considered an LEA within your state, within the area, and what that looks like? If that's the case, then you are required to uphold McKinney-Vento services and what that looks like. So really, when it comes to virtual schooling and what virtual school looks like, it's probably best to send that question over to the helpline that I'm sure Carter and or Leanne have dropped in the chat many a times for us, but really to help you kind of walk through the individual virtual district, what that looks like and what that means for those students. But ultimately, if you are considered a public LEA, you are required to provide services under McKinney-Vento for any student experiencing homelessness.
Absolutely. So my last question to any of the three of you who would like to answer is this. What's your success story that you'd like to lift up, that you'd like to celebrate around partnerships like these? What's the story that you want to tell, that you want people to know and have in this space?
I'd be happy to start. For students experiencing homelessness in Lake County, the most common reason is doubled up due to economic hardship. Folks that are trying to move to a place where they can gain employment and set their family up for success. And we had a parent who was really reluctant to have their students in our out of school time programs, and especially on Fridays, it's a long day out of school for pretty young kids. But that parent received some encouragement from multiple program partners of ours and eventually enrolled in our Friday programs. And that parent was able to pick up extra work shifts as a result and sort of find the balance that they were hoping for between giving care for their students and doing what was good for the family, and was able to find stable housing, didn't have as much food insecurity as before, and some critical healthcare access were sort of all the results. So those students are still enrolled in our programs now.
And they probably don't want to go. They want to be there because that's their space, right? That they've been created, engaged in, feel safe in, and welcomed in.
I think
Yeah, absolutely.
sorry, Mike.
All
Another great example in Colorado that I'd love to showcase, on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of what a community might look like, is our Adams 12 5-star schools, is a large suburban urban district outside of Denver. And it's really the dedication of the McKinney-Vento liaison and the 21st Century program director working together that we've seen a number of success stories. I think one way they work together and really prove their worth in terms of, this is why we partner. Their programming is called Peak. And so if a student's identified as experiencing homelessness in Adams 12, if they're going to another school, if they're transferring schools, we know our students are highly mobile, they still have that similar peak experience. And so I think that is really a showcase of when you're building the programs together, you can provide supports to students that maybe you wouldn't even think about, but just knowing that, oh, we're doing the same reading program in this peak after school as I did in my last school, right? And some of those stable factors really help to contribute to student success.
Yeah, and I echo both what Paul and Mike said, like very similar stories. The agency I worked for before was a community action agency that housed a few 21st century programs, along with being a regional McKinney-Vento coordinator. we were able to really see from that 21st century side how helpful that 21st century staff was in identifying students. There were a number of stories where a family would come in and they would be so close with that staff in that 21st century that they were the first person they disclosed to that they were having troubles. They were in transition, they were doubled up, they may have been living in their car. And then being able to help connect them to the resource needed for the students to have more support and stability in school, to allow them to be more engaged and present within their 21st century program. So just great to be able to share the knowledge, to ultimately be able to help those students be successful within school, and in turn help the family have that bit of support and able to find housing and or more work hours or whatever that might look like by knowing that their students are safe within a school setting or an after-school program.
I mean, amazing stories today, amazing messages from all of you. So thank you to the three of you for investing this time in conversation. To our audience, some of you missed pieces and parts of what was shared today. You didn't get to grab a resource. You want to hear something again. We want you to know that the recording will be available on the website in a couple of weeks. The NTAC website is 21st CCLC NTAC.org, and you will be able to download, watch the video, download the resources, as well as we are going to gather together some of these resources, shared examples from the field, and add to that. I would also encourage you, please visit the NCHE website, reach out to their helpline. They want to answer your questions. So if you had something very specific that you didn't get answered, we want to make sure that that gets answered. And so as we come to the end of this time, the end of this webinar today, we're going to share that information from the NCHE helpline one more time. And I just want to say one more thank you to the National Center on Homeless Education for joining us. Please reach out to them at the number on the screen between 9 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, or send them an email anytime. I'd also like to encourage you to fill out the feedback form. I've dropped it in the chat a couple of times. Please let us know any ideas, topics that you would like to see in future webinars. And then I want to close with a very special thank you to Shanika, my co-host, our partners at NCHE, which we've already said, but also our guests, Paula, Mike, for being generous with your time in such a busy season that you took time to share your expertise with those in the field. So I hope you see all the hearts, claps, celebrations for you and the work that you do. You are phenomenal, and thank you for the challenges and the expertise you shared with us today. And so we'll give you one more time to grab the feedback form from the survey. Remember, the recording will be available on the website within 10 days. There will not be an email that goes out that's not planned at this time. So please check back, make sure you grab it, as well as the resources. We want to make sure you have the information that you need from us, the NTAC, as well as from NCHE. Please reach out anytime. If you've got questions, we are here to support you in those questions and getting them answered.